If subjects of Ymir stopped giving birth, then Titans would be gone from this world within the next 100 years or so, right? And if that happened, then the world would be free from fear and suffering at the hands of Titans. What's more, if we Eldians hadn't been born in the first place, we wouldn't have had to suffer either. Mr. Sava?
The Beast Titan, widely known for its devastating pitch and its scream that's able to turn Eldians into Titans, although only one iteration of its inheritors possess such an ability. We know two inheritors of this bestial monstrosity, and they both have very similar goals, values, and beliefs about the world around them and how they should proceed to fix the problems that lie within it. One could say they're passionate about the goals they will go forth and try to reach. One could say they're determined. Both of these will be true, as I'm about to explain to you now why the Beast Titan represents passion and determination. Before we get started with this video, make sure you guys hit that like button, leave a comment, and if you really want to support me and my channel and you're feeling generous, then subscribe. But with no further distractions, let's get back to the topic of the video. The Beast Titan was inherited by two people we know very well, Ksaver and Zeke Yeager. Why do these two, and more so the Beast Titan, represent passion and determination? To answer that, we have to take a look into the lives these two have lived, and what drove them to the point of making the decisions they've made. What are the goals of Ksaver and Zeke Yeager? To euthanize every single Eldian, because of their belief that it's better to have not been born than to suffer as an Eldian, because of your heritage and the blood that flows through your veins, to be persecuted because of what your ancestors have done. What led these two individuals down this path? What kind of people are they? To start off, I'm going to touch on Ksaver first. The brilliant researcher lived a life similar to every other Eldian born to Marley, a life filled with prejudice and strife. In his youth, he broke a capital offense by removing the armband every single Eldian born to Marley has to wear as a display of the blood that runs through their veins. A symbol that literally depicts that you're beneath anyone else who doesn't have what they would call the devil's blood. Blood that's detested so much that even when a man in war is mortally wounded, he would rather die than to receive help from an Eldian. To live a life like this would generally make the people being disrespected in such a fashion stand up and fight for their rights, for their freedoms, to receive the same humane treatment as every other individual. But then there are those few who give in to despair and wish for something more akin to non-existence, to not have to fight for freedom, to just simply disappear. Ksaver is one of those people. As I said before, Ksaver in his youth removed that symbol of discrimination. He met a Marleyan woman and they fell in love, had a child, a family. This woman loved him and their son, but then the day came when she found out he was of Eldian descent, and disgusted with this revelation, she does the unthinkable. She takes the life of their child and soon after takes her own. All because he was an Eldian. All because of the belief that they were devils. This drives the researcher to join the Marleyan warrior program, and eventually he ends up receiving the Beast Titan. He would soon spend his 13-year lifespan throwing himself into Titan research, distracting himself, and I'm sure to look for meaning after everything was taken from him. But truthfully, he lived his life regretting that decision. He held the belief that he wishes he would have never been born, but kept this to himself. He could never escape this reality, and even until his dying day, he held this belief he was ever so passionate about. He was so passionate about it that he would even break down in front of Zeke Yeager when discussing how he truly felt about everything that transpired that led him to where he was in that moment. A man looking for meaning in anything, all the while longing for the wish that he just wasn't ever born into such a cruel world, because in his mind, it would have been better to not exist than to suffer in such a world. And to be honest, could you really blame him? We see time and time again the treatment of his fellow Eldians, and long after his death, the persecution has only gotten worse, To not have to exist in such a world, to not experience such a fate, to save future Eldians from this, would be a godsend, and this same belief is shared by the person he saw his son in, Zeke Yeager. You see, the reason Zeke holds this belief is because of his childhood, how he was raised, the environment he grew up in, the stories told to him, whether it be about the true history of Eldia or the tragic fate of his late aunt, Faye Yeager, and the potential that a terrible fate could befall him and his family as well. Zeke, at a very young age, was shown two different worlds, both very cruel and damaging all the same. One, a world where Eldians are mistreated just for being Eldian, and another, where his father tries to force Zeke to be the one to change such a world. Grisha, being a part of the Eldian Restorationists, wanted to use Zeke, his very own son, as a piece for solving the problems of the Eldian people, by making Zeke enter the warrior program and have his son become an inheritor of one of the Titans in Marley's possession. As we all know, this fate, if ever met, would limit Zeke's life to a mere 13 years, but at that time, Grisha wasn't aware of this, but I'm sure if he knew, he wouldn't bat an eye and still proceed to encourage Zeke to become a Marleyan warrior. The only value and happiness Grisha ever displayed with Zeke was when he was agreeing with the views he possessed, and if Zeke were to ever have anything positive about his outcome of the furthering of his goals of Eldia's freedom. If Zeke ever failed at this task or ever had lackluster results, then the reaction of his father was disheartening, disappointing, and sometimes even terrifying.
Damn it! This is bullshit!
Talk like that. We need to support him. He's trying his best. Can't you
His
see
best
that?
isn't enough! He'll never become a warrior like that!
Grisha never really treated Zeke like a son, and more like a tool for his own selfish ambitions, no matter how noble those ambitions may have been. And while his mother may have shown a deeper care for him, even she wasn't innocent, as she too would try to force her beliefs on Zeke. Zeke never received the parental love he desperately desired, and this caused him to seek it elsewhere, and he found that parental love in Tom Ksaver. Zeke would casually talk to Ksaver from time to time, and even extended to playing catch with him, something he desperately wanted from his actual father, but Grisha would pass off any free time Zeke may have had to make him study the history of Eldia. But Zeke, realizing this made his father happy, would try even harder, but as we know, it was just never good enough. Nothing was ever good enough. Zeke would visit his grandparents every so often, and his grandfather would teach him the Marleyan history of Eldia, and he would ask Zeke if he wanted to become a warrior. Zeke, staring at a picture of his late aunt, Faye Yeager, would say he did want to become a warrior. Zeke would later confront his father while they were eating. If they keep doing dangerous things, referring to the Eldian Restorationist movement, then they would suffer the same fate as his aunt Faye. This makes Grisha snap. The death of Faye is what ultimately drove Grisha to the point of where he is now. It's why he's so motivated, so unfeeling, and so adamant that Zeke not fail. He screams at Zeke, telling him that the only reason Faye died is because the world they live in is crazy and cruel, and that they need to fight so that no one else has to meet her fate again. That they need to win their rights back and bring back a powerful Eldia. Zeke, with tears in his eyes, tells his father that his grandfather said if he didn't go outside the walls that day, then none of that would have ever happened in the first place. Grisha questions what did he do wrong, that he just wanted to see the airship. This scene is truly heartbreaking for both father and son. It shows a son desperately wanting the survival of his family and the love he has for them, despite how he was treated, and a father who hasn't been able to move on, nor forgive himself for the tragic fate that befell his sister, and being blamed for it by his own father. Grisha has a noble cause and good intentions, but trying to force such a heavy burden on your child was only damaging and only caused a rift so great that this would cost Grisha everything, because as Zeke grew closer to Ksaver, this would be the only person Zeke could confide in. After that incident, Zeke would tell Ksaver everything, most importantly that his parents are Eldian Restorationists. Zeke, knowing the Marleyan military was close to figuring out the location of this group and his eventual demise was imminent, would look at Ksaver with tears in his eyes and thank him for always playing catch with him, and that he'd remember Ksaver even when he becomes a Titan. This causes Ksaver to break down and tell Zeke to reveal to the Marleyan military that his parents are restorationists, that if he wants to survive and save his grandparents, he would do this. And ultimately, he convinces the young boy that his parents never loved him. Zeke does this, condemning his parents and every Eldian a part of the Restorationist movement to be shipped out to Paradis and be turned into pure Titans. From the perspective of Zeke, it's clear as to why he will believe Ksaver. Not once did Grisha treat him like a son. Not once did Grisha show love for him, outside of Zeke accomplishing things that will lead towards his own goals, and not once did Grisha care for anything else outside of his obsession of freeing Eldia. But Ksaver gave everything Zeke could have ever asked for, everything he wanted in a father, so he listens. After this, we see a drastic change in the boy, now turned young teen. He still plays catch every so often with Ksaver. He looks mentally healthy, a drastic change from how he would look in his day-to-day life when he was living with his parents. He genuinely has the familial connection he's always wanted. But below all this is a disdain for living, a disdain to exist, to suffer at the cruel fate of being Eldian. It sounds familiar, no? One day, while playing catch with Mr. Ksaver, the two of them have a conversation about the research Ksaver has been doing for the entirety of his 13-year term, which at this point is close to being over. Ksaver tells Zeke that the Founding Titan has various effects over the subjects of Ymir. Zeke, thinking it only has the power of memory manipulation, is corrected, and Ksaver tells him that it's more than controlling memories, and that the Founding Titan has the power to alter the bodies of the subjects of Ymir. He was able to discover that a plague had been wiped out from the subjects of Ymir's bodies thanks to the king at the time redesigning their bodies. He tells Zeke every single Eldian, every single subject of Ymir is a part of the Founding Titan's body, no matter where they are. This leads Zeke to revealing his true feelings towards existence for Eldians. As he remembers a moment of discrimination from his childhood, he asks Ksaver, would it be possible for the Eldian race to no longer be able to bear children with the power of the founder? He goes on to say that if subjects of Ymir were to stop being born, then in about 100 years or so, every Titan would be gone from this world. That the world wouldn't have to live in fear of the Titans, and that if Eldians weren't born, then they would have never had to suffer in the first place. This thought leaves Ksaver speechless. He begins to tell Zeke about his past of his young son and wife, who was a Marleyan. He divulges that, in his youth, he had taken off his armband that branded him as an Eldian, and he hid this fact from his wife. He knew he couldn't keep this secret from her forever, and the day she found out he was Eldian, she had taken the life of their son and her own. We eventually end up finding out that the reason he became a warrior was because he wanted to end his life in the grandest way possible. But over the course of the years he spent as a warrior, he devoted his life to researching and studying Titans, and he eventually met Zeke, someone that he can play catch with. He tells Zeke that he tried to find his lost son in him, that he tried running away from his sins using his Titan powers. He asks himself the question, with tears in his eyes, picturing his deceased wife and child, how much better it would have been if he had never been born. This is when we get a stark change in both Zeke and Ksaver. Zeke, with a passionate voice and determined look on his face, tells Ksaver that he will inherit the Beast Titan, not for the sake of Marley, but in order to retake the Founder so that he himself can free the world from their fear of Titans, so that he can free Eldians from their suffering, to above all else, make subjects of Ymir disappear from this world and save everyone. In Zeke's mind, the only way to save Eldia, as he exclaims to Levi, is to put them out of their misery. Zeke is so passionate and determined in this belief of his that even as he lay in the carriage with a thunder spear embedded in his abdomen and his limbs chopped off, he responds to Levi after Levi tells him he stole the life of his comrades. Zeke doesn't respond with malice and anger, but a person genuinely trying to get their point across and make someone understand his point of view. He tells Levi he didn't steal anything, but saved them. Not only that, he saved the lives of their children they would have potentially had. He saved them all from this cruel world. As I said before, Zeke truly believes it'd be better to not exist than to exist in the world they reside in. As Levi notices Zeke's limbs are beginning to grow back and is getting ready to chop them off once more, Zeke yet again displays these two very distinct traits of passion and determination. Zeke screams to himself that he hopes Ksaver is watching. With no other option, Zeke moves his head back, activating the thunder spear Levi put inside of his body in an attempt to take his life. So determined, so passionate in his beliefs that he would do something so uncharacteristic of him almost killing himself in the process. A person known to use people on any occasion, whether they were close to him or not, whether they were friends or family, whether they lived or died, all in the effort to achieve what was important to him, even going so far as to almost kill himself just to get a little closer to something he was so passionate about, something he was so determined to achieve. We, the audience, know both Zeke and Levi survived this altercation, but what happens right after this explosion is so significant. When Zeke is near death after the explosion from the Thunder Spear, he begins to reminisce about his past, from the time spent with Ksaver to meeting Yelena and forming the Volunteers, finding out his father, who he had believed had been condemned to a life of being turned into a pure Titan, was actually alive and had another son, all the way up until his conversation with Eren about his way of saving the world. And eventually, after all of these scenes flash before his eyes, and as he's on death's door, he sees the peculiar figure of a child, a very special child that we know as Ymir Fritz. All of these moments are so significant. The first scene of Zeke's memories, just as he's getting ready to pass on, shows Ksaver telling Zeke a way around Devour renouncing war, and moments before Zeke devours him to attain the Beast Titan to begin his mission. Ksaver says that he'll always be watching over him. This sets the foundation to how Zeke will go about achieving his goals, and what Ksaver says about Zeke having to find someone who he can trust will be relevant throughout his entire life. As I said before, we all know Zeke was a person who would use anyone, whether it be friends or family, to achieve his goals. He was a very deceiving person and betrayed every person close to him, all in the effort to get closer to attaining his goal. Funnily enough, the relationship Zeke had with his comrades was very contrasting to the relationship Levi had with his. While Zeke was a social wonder boy that everyone adored and admired and or looked up to, he didn't truly trust anyone and cared for very few. While Levi was the complete opposite of his longtime rival. Levi was seen as an antisocial person who wrote people off very easily, but truthfully, he was a person who cared deeply for every single one of his comrades, a person who put trust in them even in the most daunting of situations. The only similar thing between these two individuals is that they would put their lives on the line for what they stood for and believed in. This difference in character was truly the underlying conflict between these two individuals. In the second memory, we see how the anti-Marleyan volunteers were established after Zeke had saved Yelena, one of the only people who he truly trusted enough to reveal his true plan of euthanizing the Eldian race to, from one of the many battles Marley will participate in. Yelena tells all the brave volunteers that they will use the power of the Titans to overthrow Marley, for what they must abhor is not the power of the Titans, but rather the weakness of being consumed by such a power. This reestablishes the beliefs of Zeke that the power of Titans has caused nothing but suffering for Eldians, due to actions of the ancient Eldian Empire, using the power of Titans to destroy and suppress enemy nations that dare to stand against such overwhelming strength, and also will challenge Eren's own ideology due to possessing such power. The third memory shows Zeke conversing with Reiner and Berthold about Eren and the powers he possesses and his lineage. This is the moment Zeke learns of his surname being Yeager and Eren being his younger half-brother. This moment shows Zeke is still haunted by the things that transpired in his childhood, believing that Eren had the same things done to him as he himself did. This causes Zeke to sympathize with Eren without truly knowing anything about Eren whatsoever, and projects his own circumstances onto Eren, believing he was indoctrinated into Grisha's beliefs of freeing Eldia, even with extreme measures if necessary. Zeke believes in this so much that he states he himself will save Eren. And finally, the last memory we see is a fated meeting between the two brothers, discussing their supposed identical ideals. Before this scene, Eren had already conversed with Yelena about Zeke's true intentions with the power of the Founder, and apparently, Eren is in support of this plan. But as we all know, this is an act, and this is an important detail. As Eren utters words eerily similar to Ksaver about wishing to have never been born into their world, this causes Zeke to remember time spent with Ksaver, playing catch, and he begins to tear up, once again, not only showing his care for one of the only individuals he cared for, but the beliefs he's so passionate about and determined to carry out. And what better person could he have hoped to help him in this journey other than his younger brother? Zeke, fully agreeing with Eren, wants to give him something in lieu of a handshake. He decides to toss Eren a ball, and he misses the catch. This clearly symbolizes that Eren isn't completely on Zeke's side. Zeke picks up on his feeling, and this causes Zeke to do what he's always done in order to get to his goals. This causes him to deceive and use Eren for his own benefit, his own brother. But this also causes a conflict within Zeke as well. All of these things will come to a head when Zeke enters the paths, but before we get to that point, let me touch on his meeting with the original founding titan, Ymir Fritz. Once Zeke is done recalling every major event that defines him, he is about to pass on, until he's put inside the belly of one of his many pure titans he summoned. As this happens, his consciousness is transported over to the paths realm, where Ymir awaits him. Many people are aware, and there are just as many people unaware, that when healing or transforming into a titan is linked between two distinct things: a shifter's will to live, and subconsciously calling on Ymir to either build their titan bodies or heal their human bodies when injured. This is where we get to headcanon territory, since it's not thoroughly explained why this meetup between these two individuals happened. We know Zeke at this point should be in a state of irreparable damage due to the point-blank explosion of the Thunder Spear that was inside of his body, and that there is only so much damage a shifter can take and heal from. As we've seen Porco, with way less damage, not be able to continue to heal after being severely beaten by Eren. I have 3 reasons behind why Zeke was able to come back from this devastating state he was in, each being more likely than the last. 1. His royal bloodline allows him to access this realm. 2. Since Eren saw the future of what was to come, he couldn't have been allowed to die at such a point due to Eren needing to fulfill his prophecy of unleashing the Titans within the walls. Or 3. His will to live and determination to carry out his mission gave him the strength necessary to come back from this state. The first one couldn't really be true, as we've never seen anyone else with royal blood access this realm due to their injuries, even full-blooded royals. The second one is more likely due to the fact that the future can be said to be a linear path, but I'll have a video why this isn't exactly the case either, just due to the fact that when Eren and Zeke went through Grisha's memories, his reluctance to slaughter the Reese family and Eren's interference with that pretty much sums up why this can't be the case. Eren could have easily made the choice not to do anything in that memory, but due to his nature, he couldn't help himself but push forward. Now, the third and final reasoning is the most likely scenario and the one I believe to be the case, just based off of what has transpired in the story. There are many examples of a shifter's determination and will being enough to change the outcome, even when in a state of disarray. The 2 most prominent scenes are with Reiner and Eren, as they show both sides of this, with Reiner showing the Titan transformation and Eren showing the human side. In the destruction of Liberio, Reiner has lost all will to fight, due to the immense guilt he feels with the things he's done over the years of his life. He literally says he wants to vanish and he wants Eren to end him. This, accompanied with the point-blank Titan explosion he was hit by due to Eren, causes him to be in a state of unconsciousness that he only awakens from after hearing the pleas of Gabi and Falco for him to save Porco, giving Reiner enough will to transform, but still being in a mental state of self-doubt, he was unable to transform correctly. Now, for the human side, Eren shows us, in his battle against Dynafris's pure Titan, Eren is in a state of hysteria. After he witnesses the death of Hannes, this causes Eren to temporarily give up, thinking that nothing has changed and all is lost. Due to the inspiring words from Mikasa, he was able to get back up on his feet again and heal his hands immediately. This is why the third scenario of his will to live being that strong and the passion he held for his mission he dedicated his life to, accompanied with his determination to carry it out, even at the expense of himself, literally trying to take out Levi at the detriment of his own body, was what brought him back in the end. This reasoning makes the most sense with what we are presented with in the story, without the idea being too outlandish. In the end, these 4 scenes show us just how powerful Zeke's beliefs are. He truly believes this world is suffering and that his cause is correct. There's no doubt in him, as when he comes back, he says Eren's famous line, that he just needs to push forward. And he does. When Eren and Zeke enter the paths, Zeke ends up deceiving Eren, as he's done with everyone, showing us the scene of Eren missing the catch to symbolize that Eren wasn't truly on Zeke's side. And as I said before, Zeke picks up on this fact. Zeke will betray his brother just as he did his late father, because that's how important his goal is to him. This is how passionate and determined he is. But as I said before, this leaves him conflicted because unlike with his father, Zeke truly does love Aaron, and for the sole reason that he believes Aaron has suffered from the same upbringing as he once did. Believing Aaron was indoctrinated into the beliefs leading him down this path. He wants to save Aaron. After exploring Grisha's memories and realizing that Aaron had nothing remotely similar to the upbringing he himself had, Zeke questions why Aaron would betray him. Aaron tells him it's because this is the way he's been since his birth. As he himself said, if someone tries to steal away his freedom, he won't hesitate to take theirs. He realizes that the reason Grisha continued on with his mission and slaughtered the Reese family was because of Aaron himself. And after Grisha is able to talk and communicate with Zeke about everything that is about to transpire after this moment, Grisha apologizes to Zeke for everything that he's done, claiming that he was a terrible father and he wished he had played with him more when he was a child instead, Zeke's greatest desire. This shatters Zeke's whole perception of the father he thought Grisha was, and how he believed Grisha only cared for the restoration of his mission, to the point where it brings tears to his eyes as his beliefs were starting to crumble. But he still holds on to that dream of ending the Eldian's suffering. Grisha makes one last request to Zeke, and it's to stop Aaron. And with this in mind, he attempts to, but still with his goal in mind of his euthanization plan. We all know this is the point where Aaron and Zeke are cast out of Grisha's memories, and Zeke fails to stop Aaron in convincing Ymir to enact the rumbling, and this leaves Zeke trapped in the paths. After Armin is teleported to the paths realm and he confronts Zeke, we come to find out Ymir ate Zeke, and that's why he and Armin are in the paths. Zeke tells Armin the story of Ymir, and how ultimately, even though she created a world free of everything, even death, which is the paths, she still felt connected to the world she left behind. He claims he couldn't understand Ymir, but Aaron could. This is because, as I said before, if you haven't forgotten, Zeke was a very deceiving person who never connected with anyone. He was willing to betray everything and everyone to attain his goal. Zeke wasn't connected to anything and had nothing to connect with after the death of Tom Ksaver. He threw away all of his relationships, his allies, friends, family, everything in pursuit of his desire. Meanwhile, Aaron was willing to commit mass genocide, never forgetting his home, his family, or his friends. He did all of that because he was still connected to his previous world, no matter how much it changed. Aaron and Ymir are identical, whereas Zeke and Ymir are far from the same. Aaron actually treated her as a person, whereas Zeke only treated her as nothing more than a slave. Armin tells Zeke he's not going to give up, and Zeke responds by asking why Armin still seeks to multiply. Multiply in this context meaning to exist. Why the continued existence of his species is so important to him. As we know, Zeke wants to end this multiplication. He tells Armin that fear is what he's ultimately fighting against, and in this context, Zeke equates fear to extinction. He asks Armin what would be wrong in losing that battle, because to live means to one day die. In this state, we see that Zeke has all but given up, due to not being able to do a thing and being trapped in the paths. He questions if one's final moments brings a sort of relief, again referring to the end of suffering that he's wanted to enact for so long. Because as he said, in the end, you don't know if what you've done had meant anything at all, but at least a lifetime of manipulation in the name of growth will be over. And Zeke says that sounds like freedom to him. Armin responds by telling Zeke about his childhood and the small moments he spent with Aaron and the rest of his friends. He comes to the conclusion that the point of life is to enjoy the small, trivial moments. He deems those are the moments that are most precious, as he's holding a leaf to signify his memories, but what Zeke sees in his hand is a baseball. As Armin is handing the baseball over to Zeke, Zeke questions why was it buried there, and Armin responds by telling him who knows. But to him, even if there is no need for something like this in order to multiply, it's still incredibly precious. This causes Zeke to remember moments spent as a child playing catch with Ksaver, and in an awe-inspiring twist, Zeke changes his perception and agrees that were those small moments that made life worth living. He states it didn't mean a thing, as in the grander scheme of things, but he would have been happy playing catch forever. Truly, what Zeke ultimately wanted was to be happy. He wanted those small moments, and as a child, we see that as well. He always desired to play catch with Ksaver and even wanted to extend that love to his father. He wanted to get the feeling of a father being proud of their child, putting forth the effort, a child doing their best, but those moments were far and few between, and eventually vanished altogether. When Zeke all but failed the Marley and Warrior program, he was happy just being a regular kid. He would have been content living in the internment zone for the rest of his life, but above all else, he just wanted parents he can come home to that were happy with him and life in general. All he wanted was a regular life. We see he never escapes this mindset, as this is what he based his newfound dream on to end all suffering, and the passion behind it so great because of the traumatic experiences that led to it. And as I said before, as Zeke learned of the existence of his younger brother, the only thing he thought was that he too had suffered the same fate, and that Zeke himself was still haunted by those memories. This is why he was so adamant on saving Eren, even in the event when he had to deceive him. He believed it was for his own good. As Zeke turns around in the paths, he sees multiple figures behind him, the two most prominent being his father Grisha Yeager and Tom Ksaver, the two men who played a heavy role in his life and shaped him into the man he is today. Zeke ends up helping the Alliance by awakening every Titan shifter in the paths. We see him have a conversation with Ksaver. He tells Ksaver that they didn't get to achieve their dream, but he doesn't believe it was a mistake, showing us just how passionate he was about the dream the two of them shared. We see Zeke also has another passion, another desire. He says to Ksaver, if it meant he can play catch with him again, he wouldn't mind living again. This is truly one of the most shocking character twists in the series. Zeke was a character just as adamant about his goal as Eren was about his own, and for him to say something that directly goes against what he wanted throughout the entire series only shows the growth of his character and how much more nuanced he actually was as an individual. As I said before, his desires as a young child never left him. The change is so drastic, he even ends up thanking Grisha, the father he hated for so long. Zeke found a new passion to give others a chance to experience a life he never got to let others enjoy the small moments he wished he had. In a brazen attempt to give the Alliance one last fighting chance in order for this to be achieved, Zeke shows himself, and the person he shouts to end him, the person who wanted to end him the most, he shouts out to Levi. And Levi is the one to take Zeke's life, fittingly so. Zeke says to himself before the blow is struck that it's a beautiful day, a day he wished he had seen earlier, but after everything he's done, it's just too much to ask for, and Levi takes his life, with no pleasure on his face while doing so, as he knows Zeke did this for the scouts, for his former comrades, for Marley, Eldia, and the rest of the world, all in the effort to give them a chance to see another day. This causes the end to the rumbling, and Zeke's mission, his new passion, is complete. All Zeke wanted to do, like he told Ksaver all those years ago, was to save everyone, and he did. Zeke is truly a complex character, and I have to say, one of my favorites of the series. He was truly an individual packed with a lot of story and a lot to delve into, and I have to say, I got emotional several times while going back and researching his character for this video, as it's hard not to sympathize with his character. I believe Zeke showcases just how confusing life can turn out to be for an individual if raised in severe circumstances. With countless pressures on you and to live up to a certain standard, it can be hard directing yourself to what you want, and sometimes you may not realize it until later on in your life when you think it's too late, and oftentimes a tragic reality is that it can be. Too many times do we hear stories of people giving up or how they've made a wrong choice that they've stuck with for too long, which eventually leads to a path of self-destruction. But I truly believe at any point in our lives, we have the power to find a new passion and carry that out with equal amount of determination in order to achieve or get as close as possible to that goal. Zeke shows us that no matter what you dedicated your life to, if it's a detriment to yourself, it's possible to make a positive change in the world, even if you've done bad on this planet. Even if you once threw everything away for what you deemed to be important to you, you're able to look back and reflect on what led you to this point, And you have the opportunity to make a choice, to be the same individual at no value to yourself, or to make a positive change for yourself. I truly hope everyone on this planet is able to make that change, if ever faced with such a scenario, because to truly enjoy this existence in this crazy world of ours, you have to find and enjoy those fleeting moments you may one day not have anymore. I tell all of you all of the time to spend these precious moments with people you care for, whether they be friends, family, lovers, or just those random interactions you may have with people you may never see again. Cherish these moments and remember those memories. We may never know what can happen the next day, but you have a duty to yourself to enjoy your life in the present. Everything doesn't have to be grandiose, although it is okay to be passionate and determined about such a thing. Just never forget, underneath all those pressures, the things you truly cherish in this world. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.